Would you give me your attention, please? We want to kick this off on time because it's I think one of the most important meetings that we're going to have during this conference. Of course, I'm a little biased in that regard, but you have a very unusual panel here today. One that I've rarely seen at one of these, where you start with the requirements generation people, you go to the people that, actually you start with the technology people, the requirements people, then you get to the development people, but one of the most important also happens to be the funder. And he's here too that will help you do that. And then you have the sustainment piece in the Army Materiel Command. So I think that you're going to enjoy this very much, and with that I'll turn it over to Ms. Heidi Shyu. She's the Acting Assistant Secretary in ASALT and also the Army Acquisition Executive. Heidi?
Thank you, Luke. Good morning. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Well, front row said yes. So I'm ready to go. Okay. So welcome to this panel on responsive and agile modernization. I am incredibly honored to be here with you guys today. And I think you guys realize what an outstanding panel member. This is an all-star cast right here, okay? The Super Bowl team, okay? What we want to talk about today is the changing environment that we're facing and how to move ahead in light of the fiscal constraint that we're facing today, which is more challenging now than ever before. Okay? It's very important that we collaborate and work together as a team, because acquisition is not a solo sport. It is a team sport. You cannot do it alone. It requires each and every one of us to collaborate together and work together to make it a success. Okay? So one of the key things that we have found that work well for us is early and continuous coordination between the requirement community, with the acquisition community, with the budgeting guy who make or break us, okay, and with the logistics as well as sustainment and the S&T community. It's the intersection of this that we're going to succeed in. Okay. So, as you guys well know, President Kennedy has said, victory has 100 fathers. Defeat is an orphan. Right? So hopefully, we're not going to be an orphan. I want to share with you guys some of the things that we have been doing within the last 6 months or so that really has changed the direction of where we're heading. We're making some significant changes, and I would like to share those insights with you today. Okay. So, I have, like I mentioned, I've got an all-star cast team right here, starting with requirements. We have General Keith Walker from Director of TRADOC, Army Capability Integration Center. For acquisition, we have General Bill Phillips, Principal Military Deputy of ASALT, my right hand, okay, right arm, okay. And next to him, we have, for resourcing, we have Lieutenant General Bob Lennox, the Army Deputy Chief of Staff with G8, very important money man, okay. For logistics, we have Lieutenant General Mitch Stevenson, Army Deputy Chief of Staff G4. Let me tell you, incredibly impressive operation that he runs, okay. If you've never seen the way he does weekly staff meeting, attend one of them, you will be so impressed. I'm just trying to keep in his wake, okay. For sustainment, we have Lieutenant General, Dennis Villa, Deputy Commander of Army Materiel Command, who we're really happy to partner with. He is our battle buddy, as we call it, right? And what you will hear is the outstanding things that we have done in the depots and arsenal. And you'll hear the information on all the things we have done today. And for S&T, last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Marilyn Freeman, Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Research and Technology. We're leveraging this opportunity that we have here at AUSA to unveil what we're doing in focusing S&T challenges to meet Army unique needs. It's not S&T just for the fun of S&T, but focus on specific areas that the Army is interested in. So this is a new start for the Army, and we're really excited to be sharing this with you. Okay. So I'm going to start the Q&A. What I'm going to do is ask one question each down the panel, okay, and then we cycle back. I'm going to leave half hour for Q&A, so keep your questions for the half-hour session, okay? And General Wagner will time us. You tell us, okay? Thank you, sir. Okay. So I like to start out with requirement because there's a lead dog in the beginning. Nothing happens without having a requirement, okay? So what I would like to do is ask General Walker, what have we learned the last 10 years or so to help us to improve the way that Army is approaching modernization? Can you please elaborate?
Okay. I'm a veteran of 6 weeks in the Army Capabilities Integration Center. My response, to give a little background, is influenced by the last 2 years I got to spend in El Paso with Brigade Modernization Command. So as I look at our system, it kind of works like this from my layman's point of view. You know, based on our national strategy, we develop concepts, and we do that in the Army Capabilities Integration Center. You know, who is the Army and how do we operate? And from those concepts, then the business of requirements is developed in order for the Army to actually execute this concept and how we are going to operate. What capabilities do our soldiers and formations need to have in order to do that? And then those requirements begin the process of, okay, let's develop capabilities. Now, my observations so far are in the past is, you know, we did concepts about every 5 years. We'd run a new concept. And then we would get in the requirements business about identifying gaps, and we had a very bureaucratic process to do so, and didn't necessarily have the warfighter representation that I would have liked to have seen in terms of folks with recent Afghan or Iraq or other deployment experience. Then we would begin the development process, which I think was kind of over-prescriptive. I mean, we would write requirements, and from my point of view, the requirements were, we'd box ourselves into a corner. I mean, we'd be very specific, the stuff we'd pass Bill Phillips' guys, as opposed to having a more open architecture, if you will, in requirements, and give ourselves wiggle room to make trades as the development process proceeded forward. And then part of that development process was testing, and the Army Test and Evaluation Command is a wonderful group of professionals, but that process is pretty expensive, and it's also a lengthy process. And then, from my perspective, when we'd actually make a purchase to deliver stuff to the Army, you deliver it to the whole Army. That's an expensive process. It might not necessarily be needed. Anyway, so there's something that takes longer and costs more than it ought to. And then some external environmental factors are going on all at the same time, like 10 years of war, technology that changed a whole lot faster than any of us, I think, even anticipated, not to mention the threat that we face every day changing a lot faster than we'd ever anticipated. So that being the baseline, we've been changing as we go. So for example, to try to hit each of those, we now write concepts every 2 years to try to adjust for the changing environment that we face. In the business of requirements, we've started the effort of not being so prescriptive, not boxing ourselves in the corner, to establish requirements that have open architectures so that you could purchase a first increment of a particular capability and have room to improve that over time. In the business of developing and testing, we worked with Army Test and Evaluation Command and, at the time, Program Executive Office Integration, now System of Systems Integration, but basically the test integrators, the material integrators, and the capability integrators, kind of this partnership Ms. Shyu is referring to, and established the Brigade Modernization Command at Fort Bliss and the Army assigned a brigade combat team the mission to evaluate new capabilities for the Army. I think that's a huge statement of the Army's seriousness about trying to do things differently and more flexibly. And then in the process of when we actually get these capabilities that we do want in the hands of soldiers, some things we don't want to give to the whole Army. I mean, if it's robotics or if something that's high-tech, a network item, if you tried to buy it for the whole Army, by the time you did, it'd be obsolete before you got, 10 brigades fielded. So we've taken an approach of prioritization to purchase those most essential capabilities to the priority of those units that need it. And then the next brigades that deploy in R4Gen to get them the next best solution, to that part of that incremental approach of building block to get the best capabilities in the hands of soldiers when we need it. Because all in all, the most important lesson I think I've learned is the faster you get a capability in the hands of a soldier in the field in an operational environment, along with the engineer that developed that capability, a training developer, material developer, and combat developer, the faster you do that, the better you stop doing things that are stupid, or you advance things with real potential. So back to your question, we are changing. We're not there yet. There's a lot of building the airplane in flight, but we're getting there, and we will codify the new process we developed to get capabilities to our soldiers.
Thank you. General Phillips.
Ma'am.
So, we're focused on implementing lessons learned from the last decade of war. And we know that the Agile an Agile process is absolutely required in acquisition. Okay. Can you please elaborate on some of the things we've been doing in the acquisition area to share with the audience, please? Okay.
Ma'am, I'll borrow, I'd gladly do that, but I'd borrow your words up front, that you said this is a team sport. It really is a team sport. And although some might, and you might read about this in the dialogue that's around inside the Beltway, that Army acquisition is broken, we have our challenges, but I can tell you without any doubt from my heart that Army acquisition is not broken. We have our challenges, but our Army and the industry that supports our Army has done remarkable work to put capability in the hands of our soldiers so that they can be successful in the field of battle. And I'll give you just a couple of examples of that. MRAP is one of those that the Army has worked, joint program with the Navy and the Marines. Fielded that in less than a year. Got it into combat operations, and how many lives have we saved because of MRAP? Then we learned some lessons about mobility with MRAP. So we initiated the MATV program. And it followed parts of the acquisition process. It was a competitive procurement. So how long did it take to get MATVs in the hands of soldiers and Marines downrange in Afghanistan? 15 months. From the thought of I need an MATV to the thought of I've got to get it, or 15 months to get it in the hands of our soldiers and our Marines, and it's saving lives. But we didn't always get it right, as Bob Lennox and I saw when we went downrange to FOB Joyce recently. The UIK, the Underbody Improvement Kit for the MATV. We started seeing what was happening to soldiers in IED events in Afghanistan. So the counter-IED work that the Army has done from UIK to others, and I see past and present PEOs and PMs in here that have worked so hard on counter-IED to fill crew and Duke and other systems and get them downrange. Extraordinary success in fielding products to soldiers to protect them. And the one that comes to mind most recently is Stryker Double V Hull. Stryker formal program. Who was here in October of '99 when General Shinseki stood in this forum several years ago and said, we're going to field an interim force and we're going to call it the IBCT, and it was a part of the three-pronged chart that the Army was going to execute in modernization. And we fielded Stryker with 3-2 with Colonel Mike Rounds at that point, went through JRTC, went through NTC, deployed, fielded, trained, equipped, deployed in combat operations in Iraq in less than 4 years on General Shinseki's watch. This team did that. So when you talk about acquisition, man, back to your point, it's a team sport. It's the S&T folks that Marilyn works on, our battle buddy Keith Walker on the requirements, and he eloquently described how we're changing some of the things and how we're crafting requirements. Given to our resources who have to figure out how to resource that with our battle buddy Bob Lennox. And then you've got Mitch Stevenson and Dennis Fye on the sustainment side, which sometimes we forget about. That's about 70% of the cost of our programs. So that piece is so critical. So our Army has really done so much. And I could go on and talk about UAS systems, exponential growth, helicopter programs that have done so well. We have over 500 aircraft flying downrange today in Iraq and Afghanistan doing extraordinary work. Some of them are some of the older aircraft, but we've got F-model Chinooks flying in Afghanistan, doing remarkable work, flying up to 15,000 feet, sometimes more. Bob Lennox and I just flew over a 10,000-foot mountain coming back from Fob Joyce recently. Barely. and that was in a Black Hawk.
If we had eaten a bigger dinner, we wouldn't have made it.
Probably not. But we have done some really great work. And one other system I want to mention, too, because it's really important. And it was a winner the other night in the Army Acquisition Awards dinner, if some of you were there. It was the 855A1, New Enhanced Performance Round. That if something that's small, and you may think, how important is this? This round is so important with what it does downrange with our soldiers. They knew all about it. And we found the leadership didn't know everything about this round, but soldiers knew what it was doing. And they're firing this round out of the M4, optimized for the M4 itself, and it's saving lives and actually killing the enemy downrange today. It's a remarkable weapon tied to the M4. M4. Over 60 improvements. The baseline requirement for an M4 is about 600 mean rounds between failure. The experience we're having downrange today is about 3,600 rounds between failures. So it's 6 times the requirement. So the M4 carbine is doing great work today. But we're not without our challenges in acquisition. And we've got a lot of help from General Wagner and Mr. Decker and others to help us identify some of the challenges we have and take them on. And one of those is the team sport and the partnership. Some hard lessons by, and I'll point at our community, our PEOs and PMs, not really looking so hard at the requirement, simply accepting what we've been given and then trying to work within the resources that we're provided to deliver those programs. We can no longer afford to do that. We have to take advantage of every tax dollar that we get from the American public and take advantage of it. That requires PEOs and PMs to work with the TICMs and the TRADOC community and to make sure that we got it right for our soldiers. And let me say this. You heard, if you were in the breakfast this morning, you heard Secretary McHugh and General Odierno talk about trust. And they talk about really trust with soldiers and families and others, but there's also a trust that I'll extend that to. Our soldiers that are on the front lines of freedom today trust us that we in this acquisition community will deliver for them and will deliver capability. They trust us that we will give them the tools they need to be successful. Dan Bolger, it was just a while back before he left as a G3, we were having a discussion one day. Dan Bolger said about the weapons that our soldiers carry and the body armor, because it was a discussion about how good or how bad the body armor is. Bottom line, we have the best body armor in the world. Our soldiers are tenacious on the field of battle. And he said part of the reason is they have trust in their equipment, that it's going to work and it's going to defend them. So when they engage the enemy, they are tenacious. And they trust us that we will deliver that. And it's not just us here. There's another ingredient where we need your help, and that's the industry partners that are out there. We need your help so we can develop more collaboration with industry so we can make sure that we together are looking at the requirements and making sure that we can deliver them. And that's an ingredient that's been missing in the past. So when we have industry days or draft RFP reviews, whatever you want to call it, we're asking for your honest feedback on our requirements so we can refine them, we can get them right, and we can build a better acquisition strategy, because at the end of the day, we got to build an acquisition strategy that's going to meet the battle buddies requirements that we have going forward. That's absolutely critical. So industry, the message to you is we need your help so we can help get it right for our soldiers, because they trust that we will do that.
Thank you. General Lennox. I'd like you to talk about what are the implications of the current budget reductions on Army's equipping programs.
Thanks, ma'am. I've kind of lost my voice yelling at PMs and PEOs over the last couple of days. No, I think we're partying too much in support of AUSA. But let me start by saying that the things that Keith and Bill just talked about are instrumental parts to addressing budget cuts, and there will be budget cuts. And if you do math in public, and you've heard the term $450 billion cuts to the Department of Defense, $49 billion cuts to the Department of Defense over 10 years, divided by 10, divided by 3 or 4, depending on which newspaper you read or which think tank advises you. You'll come to the neighborhood of $12 to $14 billion cuts to the Army per year. And major costs for us are end strength. And because we're fighting wars, you can't draw down your end strength fast enough to offset those cuts. So the brunt of those cuts will come in modernization and training accounts. It's just math. It's not scientific. It's not something we want to do. It's something, given the numbers, that will likely happen. So what are the implications for us? Bill talked about it very eloquently, I think. We can't forget that we have soldiers in combat today. We're reminded about it constantly. The folks up here are reminded about it constantly. But they require our attention. We have to equip them for the current fight, and we have to make sure they have the best equipment in the world. And as a team, I think we've done a magnificent job of that. People do criticize acquisition. There's a laundry list of things that we talk about that are huge successes, from UAVs, many of the things that Bill talked about, precision fires and Excalibur, and then the APMI precision mortar system, and now working with the PGK to make our old dumb 155 systems precision. We've done an amazing job with the weapons and the rounds. Bill talked about the enhanced performance round, the optics that go in a soldier's weapon, the body armor, a phenomenal teamwork that's delivered these capabilities for soldiers. We can't stop. We have to make sure our soldiers in combat today have the best equipment. And it's a team in here that does that, frankly. Congressional support, industry teamwork, requirements, sustainment, as a whole team. So, and I think the other caution that we've heard from Secretary Gates before he left, leaders in the Army today, said not only do you have to get it right today, but you have to get it right tomorrow. And we traditionally don't get it right for tomorrow. So in a budget-constrained environment, how do you make sure that you have to have a modernized Army in the future? It can be smaller, but it has to be equipped and it has to be trained. And we have to take that responsibility on, and we have to do what's right for our soldiers in the future. So we built, and you'll hear them unveiled today, that they're not 10. I couldn't think of 10. I only have 7 commandments of a budget-constrained environment. So this was what would have happened to Moses if part of the tablet broke off on the way down the hill. 7 commandments. And so first of all, for me, we have to set and enforce our priorities. And we've done that on the I know widely read Army Modernization Plan 12, and on the G8 website. We talk about Army priorities. You'll see them there. Network number 1, ground combat vehicle, and you can go down them. So there's no real need to change those priorities. We have them. We've done that work. Now we have to stick to them, and as we get funding cut, it'll go from lower priority to higher priorities. Keith talked about revalidating and adjusting requirements as needed and avoiding requirements creep. Commandment number 2, I think we have that kind of environment set by Bill Phillips' team, set by the ARCIC team. We've talked about it. We've demonstrated it in the ground combat vehicle, and most recently with the Joint Light Tactical Vehicle. We're committed to the program. It's been 8 or 9 months of hard work, of asking tough questions about bringing down the requirements so that we can lower the cost of the vehicle, and now we think we've got a program in the way ahead. For us, the third commandment is making sure our affordable requirements are looked at the portfolio level. And we published a white paper. I know you guys have all sorts of free time to read. Affordable and Integrated Army Equipment Modernization White Paper. I have one copy up here in case you haven't seen it. It's also on our website. We talk about trades at the portfolio level. So prioritizing within portfolios, a teamwork of the TRADOC commandants with the PEOs working to solve and resolve problems, and then prioritizing and doing only the most important things. Using affordability as independent variable, focusing on affordability, understanding how that program fits in the overall portfolio of Army programs, and making sure costs are constrained. Eliminating redundancies and leveraging efficiencies. For us in the Army, we've demonstrated that. We moved the C-27 program to the Air Force. We've taken the Joint High-Speed Vessel, and when they're built, we cut the rope and they float over to the Navy side of the harbor, and they man them and employ them. The EMARS aircraft and the EMARS program, we're looking at the Air Force to pick that up with Project Liberty. So I think we've demonstrated trust from the Army perspective that we can rely on our joint brethren to do those kind of roles, and we're going to have to trust them to do that in the future. We've got to leverage mature technologies, COTS products, and very quickly field and replace things over time. And the last one, and Keith talked about it earlier, was managing procurement quantities to the pace of modernization. So you don't field the entire Army with something that by the time you get the last truck fielded, you find out that you need an MRAP HEV, and you haven't built that truck yet. So you've got to start all over again. So fielding the latest technology and capability sets that can be modernized and built as you field the systems over time. So the 7 commandments, you've heard them here first. They've come down from Mount Sinai. Thank you, ma'am, for allowing us to.
Thank you. We all have to be really nice to him, otherwise our budget gets cut by him.
Not me.
So, Mitch, you have a lot of experience in the area of logistics and maintenance. Can you please elaborate on how this condition-based maintenance helped to improve the Army?
Yes, ma'am. Most of you have heard various truisms about, the initial investment in a weapon system is maybe 30, maybe 40% of the life cycle of a weapon system's cost. The other 60 or 70% come from sustainment. And certainly a piece of that is maintaining the piece of equipment, especially our capital-intensive systems like ground combat vehicle, joint light tactical vehicle, our aircraft, and those kinds of things. So we're very interested in how to reduce maintenance costs, and we're doing that in a number of ways, increasing reliability, increasing maintainability. But there's a new thing that we're after, and as mentioned by Ms. Shyu, it's called condition-based maintenance. Now, how many of you in the audience drive a GM product? Show of hands, a GM product. And those of you who own a GM product, how many of you bought OnStar with your GM product? Still a few hands up. Those of you who own OnStar really have condition-based maintenance in its rudimentary form. It's the ability of the platform to capture information and report it to help the operator. And we really look at condition-based maintenance information in 2 groupings. The first is emergency information I need to know right now because it's going to affect my ability to operate. And the other is historical information that engineers can use to study and learn about the performance of a system over time. And we're after both of those because they're both important. And you can see that manifested most readily in our aircraft systems today. About 2/3 of all of Army aviation today has been instrumented and in a basic form of condition-based maintenance. We're not where we want to be in our end state, but we have the basics of condition-based maintenance in 2/3 of our aircraft. We have documented cases, I know of 4 of them off the top of my head, where we have stopped an accident before it happened because we got information from the platform telling us that a component was about to go bad and we needed to take action. A component that we would otherwise not have known was going to go bad. That's really key. But it's also important in terms of how much we spend on a weapon system. Today we replace parts, depending on what type of weapon system you're talking about, in many cases based on time. An engineer's best estimate as to how long a component part is going to last. And so during a service, we'll replace parts after so many thousand miles or so many hours. In the aviation business, we have a term called time between overhaul, where components have to be replaced just based on time. But wouldn't it be neat if you had a lot more scientific information about how long that part was going to last, and you were able to gather that scientific information over time from the platform itself? And that's really what we're after in condition-based maintenance. It's about making the force more effective. Imagine as a commander, you're about to go into combat, you're about to leave a FOB, you're about to cross the LD, whatever type of combat it might be. But imagine what you'd want to know about your equipment. You'd want to know, is it ready? And is there an impending failure anywhere in there that might cause my ability to complete the mission? Condition-based maintenance is going to give us that. And it's also going to reduce cost, which is an especially valuable thing for us as we head into the future of what we suspect are going to be reduced budgets, particularly on the O&M side. So for both of those reasons, that will be why condition-based maintenance is good for the Army.
That's great. General Vi. Okay. I know that I've had an opportunity to visit Corpus Christi. It's one of many of the organizations that you own. But I can tell you I was incredibly impressed with the efficiencies that you guys have gained over the years. Can you please elaborate on some of the efficiencies and improvements that you have done in the organic industrial base?
Well, thank you, Ms. Shyu. And certainly as we talk about the organic industrial base, these are the silent heroes that we have. And when we talk about non-commissioned officers being the backbone of the Army, I think we look at our depots and arsenals as being the backbone of Army readiness. And these are silent professionals. You don't hear much about what they do, but the work that they do every day is absolutely incredible. They're the economic engine in the communities that they're located. They're some of the most patriotic folks you'll ever meet. They all focus on delivering capability to our warfighters in the most efficient and effective manner possible. It's been a huge success, of course, with fighting a war on two fronts and the amount of equipment that's been involved. But let me put that in perspective a little bit of what our depots and arsenals have delivered in the last 10 years of war. These are not the same organizations that we had in August of 2010 when we look at them today after 10 years of war. Since the initiation of combat operations and Operation Enduring Freedom, these depots and arsenals and national maintenance facilities have repaired over 2,500,000 pieces of equipment across the enterprise. And just look at that number itself, what that represents in terms of man hours just to get that done and to be able to reset that equipment and then get it back into the fight. 7,300 tracked vehicles, 46,000 Humvees that have been recapped through the reset program, reset program, 3,800 aircraft, and we know how heavily we're utilizing aviation in Afghanistan especially, and so being able to turn those aircraft and get them back. And when you look at missile systems, over 19,000 missile systems, and at Toby Hanna, 39,000 night vision devices, 192,000 SINGARs, 30,000 generators. And if we get performance-based logistics on generators, guess what we'd be able to save there? 73,000 communication systems and 187,000 COMSEC items. And those are people that are working that 24/7. The last 2 years continue to do that every day. But we've expanded beyond just the work that's being done at the depots and arsenals. We brought the depots to the warfighter. And so over the last 10 years, we've been, well, basically since 2008, we've been able to deploy our depot personnel to the actual installation, to the Braggs and Hoods of the world, so they can reset Army equipment, small arms, night vision devices, to protect that soldier dwell time. And those teams have been absolutely invaluable in what they've done. And the numbers, again, tremendous in terms of over 971,000 small arms repairs that they've done there on site. 252,000 night vision devices, 192,000 SINGARs, and over 382,000 chemical biological equipment items. And so they've done that there at the unit, avoid having to ship that equipment back to the depots and arsenals and reset it. It's there at the unit. They turn it in, quick turn so they can get prepared for the dwell time, reset, and begin to go forward. And during the past several years, of course, as we've had surge requirements come forward, both in Iraq and Afghanistan, because we've had that industrial base there, that organic industrial base, and working with our partners in industry, we've been able to surge and meet the requirements. When they've come in from the war zone that we need this equipment right away, we've been able to ramp up our production lines and gain the material and deliver it in time. We've done substantial investment in terms of our organic industrial base in terms of $1.4 billion in the capital investment program, military construction. This covers new technology and equipment. And so, ma'am, what you saw at CCAD, that was part of that investment that we've seen there. Tooling, lighting. If you go in some of these facilities, they're built in World War II, so the lighting is not exactly what we have here. And so we're looking at how we can be more efficient in our energy conservation and standpoint. We've improved the efficiency and quality of our industrial base operations through continuous transformation of our business processes, Lean Six Sigma, value engineering, and quality. And we've also invested in safety, because our employees are our most valuable product that we have, our teammates. And so working with AUSA and the Voluntary Protection Program, we've been able to use that as a principal vehicle to improve safety across our depots as well, and we've seen a reduction in terms of accidents. And then the last piece I would add is on the quality work environment. It doesn't take much when you have the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army visit one of your facilities, as General Corelli did. You probably heard of his visit, and when he went out to one of the ammunition plants and he saw the facilities, it was not where he thought it needed to be in terms of a quality work environment. And so we began initiatives where we briefed back to the Army staff, working with the G4 and the G8 and our battle buddies here as we go forward to G3, to be able to meet that quality work environment, make sure we're meeting the standards out there to support our employees. So that's just a few, and I'll, as we go forward, of course, we want to make sure that we continue to invest in this organic industrial base that we built over this past 10 years. And I think that's some of the challenges we've talked about when we enter an austere environment, is how do we protect for the next contingency? Because we know there'll be a next contingency. We know there'll be surge requirements in the future. So how do we right size? What do we retain so that we'll be able to have this organic industrial base to deliver what it's delivered for our Army for the last, really for our nation for the last 10 years, and what it'll continue to deliver as we reset our Army after 10 years of war and continue to support combat operations in Afghanistan. At the end of the day, we just want to make sure we have the resources, so always look to the G8. We want to have the skill sets and the capabilities required to support the life cycle readiness of our warfighting weapon systems. And as Bill Phillips talked about 60 to 70% of that as we go into those life cycle costs. So we need to make sure we retain what we need in the organic industrial base to meet those requirements.
Thank you. Marilyn, okay. I know when you and I both first came on board last summer, we both talked about the need to drive the S&T community to focus on challenging problems that the Army has uniquely, rather than doing technology for the sake of technology. Right? So can you elaborate on the tremendous effort that you've worked on for the last year to accomplish that, please?
Yes, ma'am. It's really exciting to be here to be able to talk about that. And later on Wednesday, we're going to be having a more in-depth session to discuss this new approach to Army S&T. But let me tell you a little bit about how we got there during this last year. I mean, this was not just an effort of, my sitting in the Pentagon and by myself, and or even just Ms. Shyu and I sitting there figuring out what we thought needed to happen for S&T. What we did was we said, okay, let's figure out where the Army's going. Well, obviously, we know we have a severely constrained environment coming our way, financially, in terms of personnel and everything else. We also know that we have a tremendously talented and capable staff of scientists and engineers, about 1,150 scientists and engineers out there who support not only just the S&T portion as you think about it, but rather the whole life cycle with their experience and their capabilities. And we said, we really need to make sure that we maintain that in the future as a vibrant force workforce able to support all through all of the things we need. We said, so if money's going to go down, I've done this for 32 years, and every time I've seen money go down, the first bill payer has always tended to be S&T. And we know that that's probably not the right answer in this environment. We know, as we've heard everything else, it needs to be a balance. And so in order to have a balance of what not to mortgage the future to pay for the current, we know we have to figure that out. Now, you've heard today that we have Army priorities. You've heard that we have Army portfolios. And so the approach that we decided to take was to actually then have S&T priorities and S&T portfolios that then line up better with the overall Army strategy plan. So what we did is I partnered with at that time General Vane down at ARCIC and the rest of the ARCIC folks and the G8 to get together, and then we pulled in the G3, the G4, the G2, all the Gs, G1, G357, et cetera. We pulled all them in, and we pulled in all the lab directors and all the people from all 5 commands who have Army S&T organization. We pulled in the leaderships, the general officers and the SESs, and soldiers to help us have a workshop where we formulated a set of problems. So problems that we said, these are real Army problems that we need to solve. And we need to solve them pretty much now, and we need to solve them for the future, because this is what we see that soldiers are going to have to continue to do. And so we looked at these things and we said, now, in order to do that, where have we had the biggest challenges? And we decided, in concert with everybody else, looking at soldier as the decisive edge being our focus. So instead of looking and saying, okay, let's talk about modernization of the whole Army, we said it really appears to us that in the S&T arena and the future technologies, where we really need to apply that is at the small unit soldiers, boots on the ground level, and focus to solve problems there, because we know that we have significant challenges that we have now and that will remain challenges. Challenges with respect to force protection, challenges with respect to networks, challenges with the concept of avoiding surprise. So this group of about 100 leaders from all around the Army got together to bring all their various perspectives and to work through, if soldier as the decisive edge is what we need, what do we need, what problems do we need to solve? And we came up with, not because it was a decision to come up with this number, but it just happened to be 7 priority problems. And we articulated these problems, and when you see these problems, which we will talk about in this Wednesday afternoon session, you look at these problems, and these problems are not in geek speak. Okay, so they're not, you should be able to understand these pretty well. They're not just about technology for the sake of technology. And oh, by the way, I'm sorry, they're not in Tradoshan either, because you know, sometimes that's a different language. These are in language that we understand amount of, you know, what we want to do and how we can start talking among ourselves in all our different areas about what we can do to solve problems. So the 7 problems are in the area, and they cut across the areas of force protection. They talk about soldiers being overburdened both cognitively and physically. They talk about being able to improve our ability to store, to transport, to distribute supplies out to the edge, out to those COPs and those patrol bases out there where our soldiers are most challenged in getting the supplies that they need. We talk about waste handling as part of that. We talked about tactical overmatch. What's the problem that we need to solve with respect to tactical overmatch? We talked about maneuverability, and we talk about surprise, because if you look at any of the details that are coming out of theater, what do we find? We find that soldiers, particularly in small units, are too often surprised. And that means they don't have the tactical information that they need at their fingertips. They don't have the mission command at their fingertips that they need to truly have that power to make decisions and be ready to face a very, very adaptive and agile and often elusive enemy. And then the last one, it talks about, and some people don't like the way this one is put, but it talks about what makes a soldier tick. Because at the bottom, one thing we've learned out of the last 10 or so years of war is that this 21st century type of combat takes a tremendous, has a tremendous impact on individuals and families and decision making, and whether it's PTSD or whether it is the stresses that cause suicide. We really, really, really need to understand a lot more about the people, the soldiers themselves, how they think, what they need, how we need to train them. And that you may not think is S&T, but oh, by the way, it is. There is a tremendous amount of research that we can apply and technology that we can apply to help. And that's what these problems are about. These problems then were talked about by this 100 people. We articulated them as clearly. You're going to see that. And then from these problems, we took them to the Army leadership and said, okay, we know we can't solve these problems all by ourselves in S&T, but by continuing the partnership with the TRADOC folks who are writing the requirements, helping them understand what's within the realm of the possible, by working with the G8 to resource programs by which we have priorities and are doing things that are very focused to solve these problems, and by working with the rest of the community, we can figure out how to not only address these, but probably solve these and get a new set of capabilities to soldiers in the near term. And when I say the near term, is what we're looking at is deliverables of the first kind of sets of capability that are associated with these things in the 2017 timeframe or earlier. So the problems are about that. And then associated with those problems, that wasn't sufficient just to put a bunch of problems on the table. What we then did is we took the same group of people and we decided to break up into small groups to talk about challenges that were associated with doing these. Challenges that would talk about the piece parts that we would have to put together and understand and explore and be able to build programs around that would deliver these capabilities that we're talking about. And we came up with 24 challenges. So on Wednesday afternoon, I'm going to talk not only about the 7 problems, a little bit more, but I will also go through a set of the challenges. And since we had 24, and since we're in a constrained environment, I'm also realistic enough to know that we probably can't fund all 24 of those sufficiently. So we asked the Army leadership in what we call the ASTAG, which is many of the people who are sitting with us are the bosses, their bosses here, including the Vice Chief of Staff, and we asked them to prioritize. So they came up with a top 10 list out of those 24. All 24 they validated and said were important problems for us to focus on. And then the top 10, we said we would really, really, really try to get programs developed for within this next year. And then the top 5, I said I would really try to, the best programs that come back out of that, I'm really going to try to move around money in the S&T POM to pay for those programs. And that's what we're really doing. We're looking at putting about $400 million of our existing funding on these initiatives that come out to address these challenges. What that will force us to do, and what the laboratories and centers are doing right now as we speak, is they are putting together a program for each one of these top 10 challenges, and they're going to have to make decisions. And they have to make decisions within their existing budget, their S&T lines, of what they're doing that is more important than these or less important than these. And if it's less important than these, if it doesn't fit into making these challenges, addressing these challenges, we're going to not do some of that, which is the part of that decision about where you decide to take risk. Now that we have S&T priorities, we can go back and we can have a standard to ask ourselves, is this investment really important? And it's only important if it really addresses these challenges, or something that is meeting a need immediately for a PM or PEO that we already are doing a program for. Those things then are what's going to help us to align our budget not only to these challenges immediately, but over time, because this is a process that we will do every year, and we will look at manage these programs. Over time, we will have a better focusing of our overall S&T budget towards real Army priorities that then transition into the deliverables, transition into the portfolios of the main Army.
Marilyn. In the next 10 minutes, I'll try to get another round of questions in. Okay. General Walker, I visited the network integration experiment basically down at Fort Bliss in the summer time frame. I was incredibly impressed with the soldiers that's out there using our either development items or programs of records and getting users' feedback from operational utility perspective. Can you please elaborate on what we've learned and from your perspective of the NIE, please?
Well, the network integration evaluation is gets after the whole issue about, as y'all mentioned, an agile capability lifecycle process, some way to do this whole business better. And it gets after the existence of Brigade Modernization Command. So let me answer it this way. I think what this does for us is it allows us to evaluate capabilities, not just material capabilities, but organizational capabilities we may be looking at, training capabilities, and evaluate it in the hands of soldiers in a brigade operational context in both wide area security and combined arms maneuver environments. Okay, so that's very important. The other thing is it allows us to do it fast. I can't count the number of times when I'd come to an AUSA and someone would say, I've got this really neat capability and soldiers could really use it. And I always wanted to say, well, hey, bring it out to Fort Bliss, we'll try it out. But we couldn't do that. But you can do it now. General Randy Dragon commands the Brigade Modernization Command, and he has the 2nd Brigade of the 1st Armored Division attached to his organization. That also is huge. This is not a test unit. It is a regular brigade combat team. So it has soldiers who have cycled through their assignments from Afghanistan and Iraq, which I think gives it the credibility you want, because when that brigade evaluates capabilities in context, I mean, they haven't memorized anything. It's a real brigade. And so this allows us to get to the number one lesson I talked about that I've learned is get capabilities in the hands of soldiers early with training developers, combat developers, and material developers. Now, doing this at Fort Bliss, Texas in White Sands, why on earth would we want to do that? Because it is the largest air-ground maneuver and spectrum space in the continental United States. I mean, you can take Fort Bragg, Fort Hood, the National Training Center, all pile them in there and you got room to spare. It's slightly bigger than the size of the state of Connecticut. That's great because our brigades in Iraq and Afghanistan are spread out that much. So how can you possibly evaluate capabilities in our number one modernization priority, the network, if you don't replicate that environment? It also gives you say, well, yeah, that's the desert. Okay, it is. You got a desert floor, but New Mexico is blessed with a lot of mountains. Salinas Peak is 9,000 feet. So that gives you a pretty good perspective of that aspect of warfare. There's plenty of cave complexes, old mine shafts, so you can evaluate robotics and network items, any other capabilities in an environment that's really challenging, so you get a good read on it. It's also the home of the 1st Armored Division. I mean, right now we're focused on a brigade combat team in the network, but as we move on in the future, our future Army modernization efforts, you may need other types of units to evaluate capabilities. So that location will have a combat aviation brigade. It's got a light brigade, a striker brigade, a heavy brigade, an air defense brigade, engineer battalion, enhanced signal battalion, MP battalions. So the Army has those type units there that, if needed, can give a realistic evaluation. It also allows us, ma'am, to look at, we talked about agile process, okay? We've got programs of record and they have formal tests. We do systems under test. But it gives us, back to my point about allows us to do stuff faster, what if you just want to look at something? I mean, a program of record has a very prescriptive, and it takes time. But if there's an idea I want to try out, we can just try it out and do we'll call that a system under evaluation and determine whether or not we want to continue with it. Save a lot of time, money, and effort that way. And we do that in that partnership with Army Test Evaluation Command and our acquisition partners. The other thing is, we do this more often. We do it twice a year. The 2nd Brigade 1st Armored Division goes to the field twice a year. And so so there's a 3-month period in the spring, a 3-month period in the fall, where the first half of that 3 months, about 7 weeks, they will evaluate new equipment fielding and new equipment training, so we can really get after the business of training development and leader development aspects of new capabilities. And then they take the new capability to the field in a brigade operational context for 4 to 6 weeks, it depends on what the things are, and then give us an actual evaluation in the field of those capabilities. That is pretty powerful. It's something we haven't been able to do in the past, and it forces partnerships with organizations like Rapid Equipment Fielding. I mean, this gives them an opportunity to actually evaluate stuff before we send it to Afghanistan. Well, that's a great idea. JIADO, similarly, organizations like to take advantage of ideas from the Asymmetric Warfare Group or DARPA, or new industry ideas that need an outlet. Now we have the ability to do that, and we haven't been able to do that before.
Thank you very much. General Phillips. Okay. You know, we're in an era of persistent conflict. We've fought 2 wars simultaneously, and I don't mean Congress and the Pentagon. Okay, so in light of our need to be a lot more agile, what are the systemic problems across the spectrum of responsibilities that we need to focus on? What are we doing to breaking down the barriers to form? You talk about a natural partnering. Now we're becoming more natural in terms of partnering. Can you elaborate?
Ma'am, absolutely. A couple of comments. First, I want to say, and I'll borrow the words of Secretary McHugh and General Odierno this morning in their comments. We have the best trained, best equipped, most ready Army in the world, and that doesn't happen by chance. It happens because of a lot of partnership of folks up here. It's OSD, it's Congress, and it's industry that's coming together to help us build this incredible Army that is so remarkable on the field of battle. And we've learned a lot in 10 years of war, ma'am, as you just said. We have learned a lot with some hard lessons about how we can do it better. So we have to apply those lessons to make sure that we improve our processes and maintain that trust with our soldiers on the field of battle today. So I'll walk through some of those. Some of them you get it just by talking to soldiers. And Keith so eloquently described the value of the NIE. And I just picked up a paper Sunday. And I don't know how Bob Lennox reaches out and touches these guys, but if you read the front page of the Washington Post, it was Captain Dan Perchinsky. I got a note from Bob Lennox about 3 months ago and said, you got to talk to him, because he has a lot of hard lessons from losing both his legs and part of his hands in combat. So he came over and he spent an hour and a half with me and the PEO soldier team and your guys, and we talked to him. And we learned how we can better protect our soldiers with equipment downrange like spider boots, and we're working on a better glove, and we're already sending a better boot into the mountains of Afghanistan that we learned from soldiers on the ground. So we do rapid acquisition really pretty good. Pete Newell, many of you know him, probably works the ref. This is about partnership and about doing the right thing, not that this is my piece of the pie and I'm a PM or a PEO or a TICM or a resourcer or whatever it might be and don't get in my lane. This is about doing the right thing for soldiers. So when I was in Iraq, I went to J.D. Johnson, who was the DCG for the 9th Corps in Iraq at that time, and said, can you help me get out to see soldiers and see missions? So he connected me with Pete Newell. So Pete Newell and I developed a relationship in combat. I would go with his team in Nasiriyah and engage with Iraqis and watch these remarkable lieutenants and captains and sergeants engage with colonels and generals in the Iraqi army. They are remarkable on the field of battle. So now Pete Newell runs the REF, and we have partnered with them, and we have to be able to get capability in the hands of soldiers. General Wagner and Mr. Decker have also helped us understand some of the challenges in acquisition. And I'll just mention a couple with you. They've helped us really understand how we have to better connect requirements to resources to acquisition strategy to sustainment. And we haven't done that very well in the past, and we've paid a hard price for that with some of our programs that many of you know the history of. We can't afford to do that in the future. So more collaboration in our requirements, better maturity of our systems. We must go into programs knowing the maturity of our systems and fill some capability that soldiers can use quickly and then put growth into it so we can incrementally build. And we must leverage and understand rapid acquisition so we can learn from that and incorporate that within our acquisition processes. And there's many others that they have given us. I think there's 76 recommendations in the report. We're implementing 63 of those already, and many of those others are under review as well. So we must learn from our past, understand what we have done, and improve in the future because, again, our soldiers trust us that we will certainly do that. And one other comment, I'll add that it's important that we apply these to programs that General Lennox mentioned. The network, the Army's most important program, ground combat vehicle. We've learned a lot of hard lessons, and we have a revised strategy going forward as a result of those hard lessons and what General Wagner and Mr. Decker have given us. And I'll apply that to the improved carbine and the Paladin PIM program as well. So, man, we are moving forward meeting those challenges.
Thank you guys very much. In the last half hour of this session, I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to ask questions from the audience directly to this panel. So if you have any questions, please feel free to step up to the mic or queue up. Okay.
I've got one, and I'm going to kind of aim it at General Lennox here a little bit. Yeah, Mitch thought it was going to be to him. And it's a frustration we're having out there with the commercial side out there working with you, to be honest with you. And that's why I'm going to, and I think I can speak for a lot of the commercial people here. John Stevenson talked a lot about condition-based maintenance, and there's a lot of money to be returned. ROIs can be huge on CBM with the capabilities that are out there in industry. I know we're working with General Vi over there and doing some things on the aviation side. But what keeps coming back as we work these and we do, excuse me, proof of principles and we do tests and all that, and the engineers, everybody's saying, wow, unbelievable ROIs coming back on this. But it comes back to, we lost our money at the end of the year, we're on continuing resolution, we don't know when that's going to break. Mm-hmm. Talk me through the budget process a little bit about how they can break through this.
Well, boy, I wish I could help on continuing resolutions. On the end of money cuts and on condition-based maintenance in particular, the challenges I think we face are the rewards don't necessarily accrue to the people that pay the bills. So when I was at Fort Bliss, Texas, and I was watching the $3 billion of construction that were going in, I said, wow, if only we could have more energy efficient buildings being built. They're being built to the industry standard, but we could have done better than that. Mm-hmm. But the trouble was the people building it, the Corps of Engineers, were not rewarded for the outcomes. IMCOM then paid the bills on utilities for the next 50 years. So in the same way, we're not linked. The reward up front isn't always there for the investments needed for condition-based maintenance because the sustainment team that pays them in the end. So it's not coming out of the same buckets. And it's those kind of things we have to be able to overcome. And as we go through different programs and we wrestle with the requirements and we're trying to keep the cost down, that's an awfully hard target to keep in mind. And I think that's our bigger problem rather than end-of-year funding being lost. It's the risk-reward of understanding the implications of your early decisions and trying to save money. You pay for it then for the life of the program. And that's not something we've completely mastered. I don't know if you want to add something to that, Mitch.
Sorry, let me get you. Are you focused on high ROI with a low fruit, a quick return, or is the Army still? Are you even looking at long-term?
I think one of our challenges is we don't necessarily look long-term. We talk about it and we're trying to do that in things like the ground combat vehicle and energy efficiency, joint line tactical vehicle. But as you try to keep the cost down, some of those OnStar capabilities get traded off. not a very satisfying answer, but I think that's what's happened.
Okay, we're just trying to figure out, I know a lot of industries just trying to figure out where we should be putting our focus. We know there's a tremendous amount of capability out here, and didn't realize until I retired how much is out here. And how far, in the military, we do drink a lot of our own Kool-Aid. I will tell you, we pat ourselves on the back and say how good we are, and then we get out here and find out we're really not as good as we thought we were. And there's a lot of ways to improve. But it's the process that really causes the problems. So we're just trying to figure out where to put the focus into the process.
Is it a process of funding that's the issue, getting something funded, or losing the funding once you have it?
No, it's usually the process. Sometimes, mainly I'd say it's a process of funding or getting through the process of the funding is the issue, or even, well, it basically comes down to funding, whether it's a long-range process you're looking at or short-range or what the focus is.
So one of the things that Ms. Shyu adroitly decided to do was skip my second question, to her credit. But I was going to talk about kind of a culture change that I think we need to have and that we're starting to experience. And Keith talked about that in his comments about the value of the NIE, the network evaluation of BLIS. And it is 95% network, but not 100% network today. And it's got the possibility to do things like check other aspects. They're going to do some vehicle checking the next year. They've done some, Spider the Minefield last year, unattended sensors. I think the idea of getting good products tested and in the hands of soldiers at Fort Bliss for an experiment would show us more readily the value of those programs, and I think help overcome some of the frustration that industry does have, and I agree with you that they do have, and help us listen more, I think, to the ideas that are out there.
Okay, thanks, appreciate it.
Any other questions?
Yeah, quick question. First, a comment, General Phillips. Thanks for your comments on the team sport, and I'm a proud acquisition officer, so hooah on that. We've been taking a beating lately. For General Walker, and kind of on the team sport concept or comments, and we've heard recently, previously from General Dempsey, and I think General Odierno as well, this emphasis on the revolutionizing home station training. We know eventually we're going to be training more at home station. Got to get at that. And again, a comment, sir, and I'll ask you for your thoughts. So there's a dichotomy in the Training and Doctrine Command. You, sir, with ARCIC, have responsibility for the requirements on weapon systems. CAC is responsible for training and education. My requirements come from the CAC side. However, I'm responsible as a PM for training devices, for training for weapon systems as well. So there's an emphasis on training. However, I got to tell you, sir, it's a constant battle on the material developer side with getting training capabilities for weapon systems. And I'll throw an example out there. We may introduce a new weapon, a change to the M4 carbine, or a new small arms weapon. We've deployed out there the engagement skills trainer. Engagement skills trainer funded partially by EEPEG and TTPEG. However, a new weapon system introduced, the weapon system side doesn't necessarily pay to have that new weapon system in this new trainer. And so over time, the training systems out there become obsolete and won't get used. I guess my question for you, sir, as the ARCIC director, what responsibility do you see and how do you get at this emphasis on training and making that a priority in your requirements? Because I'll tell you, on the training side, I don't see it. I see that kind of continuous battle. Hey, take care of training. But, sir, any comments? Do you see that as an issue?
Absolutely. I mentioned our number one lesson learned was the faster we get a new capability in the soldier's hand in the field with the capability developer, train developer, material developer. So brigade modernization tries to do that. And what we learned over the last couple of years is those training developers aren't necessarily there. As the Army has had to reallocate its resources, its people resources, and the generating force of which Training and Doctrine Command is a generating force, had to take their own cuts and make their own decisions, training developers started to lighten up. So we are good in the schoolhouses where we have priority. We are in good shape, wonderful shape in training for basic training that we do and for our training of our officers in schoolhouses. But when we talk about the aspect of training development for new material capabilities, we've got a weakness, and we recognize that. So one of the things that we are working on is RCIC does have to do everything across the doctrine, organization, training, material, leader development, personnel, and facilities domains. Now, our Combined Arms Center is clearly the lead for training and leader development. But what we have to do when we talk about new capabilities is get that started and then hand that over. So our various centers of excellence from which our requirements generate, and who have the training developers, will be working more and more closely with them to identify what are the implications of this particular capability that we're looking at on training. And General Randy Dragon specifically addresses that. So we've recognized the problem, we're starting to make progress. There are some resource issues about getting the right people in the right place in order to do that. But I'll give you an example, something that we're looking at. We have an ISR portfolio that the Army has and we look very hard at. But we probably haven't looked at what are the training implications of that portfolio on home station training. I mean, if you have sensors that operationally, down to that squad, are core of the decisive formation that we're working on. Okay, operationally, we want him to be able to access surveillance and reconnaissance information. But you could use that same capability at home station to help you conduct after-action reviews, to run the entire training exercise. That we have not tapped into, and that we're going to get after. So, acknowledge the problem, we're working it. It's just not fast enough.
Yeah, who was, sir? And I'll make one other, and agree completely, one other comment, sir, for General Phillips. We've over time, we bake in maintenance, condition-based maintenance. I mean, that's common now when we look at weapon system development. We don't do that on the training side. I mean, it's really an afterthought. It's the first thing cut, and it's not a consideration in development, my observation. Thank you, sir.
Anybody else? Any other questions? One more question. Yeah, come in.
Good morning. My question is mostly for General Walker and for Dr. Freeman. The capabilities process focuses mostly on, of course, material items, but one issue that we tend to experience in our field is, and I work in the medical community, is the challenge of knowledge products. We spend a lot of money working on these, but we don't necessarily have a good process for that. One could argue that you could use the JSIDS process to do that, but the organizational culture is not oriented in that way. My question for at least the two that I mentioned, and probably others, is how we can more effectively get at that problem so we can have a clear process. The acquisition process provides that from the material side, but how do we do that for other S&T areas?
Let me start, and then my colleagues can talk. One of the challenges that we have out there then as we formulated these problems and challenges that I was talking about gets exactly to that kind of point, which really talks about, what do we need in order to be able to get the technology that you use at home, essentially the knowledge products, the information, into the hands of the soldiers that need it and want it, or used to having it, We know the technology is often available. We don't quite know how to get it there. And one of the challenges that we have, there's several of them that really start addressing, looking at that aspect of what can we put in the hands of soldiers to give them the knowledge, tools that they have. What can we do in terms of whether it's COTS or brand new technology? A lot of it's going to be just things that we've already have. But the fact is, we have no, it's not materiel, right? The fact is, it doesn't have a place to transition. And so part of the challenges that we're talking about then, as we work through those things in a community sense, are to say, where do we hand these things off? And to try to devise, in partnership with everybody else, where do we find the requirements for those things? Who do we hand them off to? What portfolio do they go in, okay, in the Army? And it, just as we went through this process of bringing forth these challenges, particularly the ones that have to do with what makes the human tick, okay, we came up with the thing that says there's no clear place for these things to go, and we need to work on that with our, everybody else as we work through these challenges. So you've hit a very, very important point, and I don't think there is an answer yet. I think over the next year or two, we're going to have to sit down as part of working through these challenges as a community and take that on and discuss with with everybody involved, how do we solve that problem? It's not a problem of just technology. It's not a problem of just funding. It's not a problem of what industry can offer. It's a problem of how do we get something instantiated in the Army to be able to take those technologies that are either near and available and work them all the way through the system. And it's going to take a different mentality than either the materiel view of the world or even the medical or training view of the world, right? I mean, we're going to have to bring everybody together and sit down and discuss and solve these things. You're absolutely right. But it's not going to happen just by edict. We've got to devise something.
I'll give you a couple thoughts. One is you had two comments. One was about material-centric on our capabilities. We acknowledge that. Material capability is important. They cause the most attention because that's where the money is. But it doesn't lessen the importance of, like the last gentleman talked about, training. So we are, as we work requirements development and as we work capability portfolios reviews, we are redoubling our efforts to look at the other domains. The second part is about challenge of knowledge products. I think, let's see if this answers your question. One of the things that the Army's done that recognize that, it's establishing the Mission Command Center of Excellence. I mean, here we were not but a year ago, we had 5 warfighting functions. We had a Center of Excellence for each one, except we did not have a Center of Excellence established for Mission Command, arguably first among equals of the warfighting functions. So that is now established at the Combined Arms Center. A general officer appointed as the head right now, Colonel Promotable Wayne Grigsby, is the director of the Mission Command Center of Excellence. So that becomes very much about the network, but everyone touches the network, but certainly Mission Command does, and there's both a hardware aspect of that network and then there's a knowledge aspect of the network. So a couple of issues I think that they're getting after that would help with that. One is, and we do work this at the network, the NIE, Network Integration Evaluation, is the idea of Mission Command collapse. And what I mean by that is we have lots of stovepipe systems, as we all know. You go in any tactical operations center and you have, you can count terminals that are there, each one running a specific system for a particular warfighting function, you know, your AFATADs or AMDUs or what have you. So the idea is we really don't care about the hardware, it's all about the information. How can we collapse that so you have one terminal and you choose your application and everyone's on the same sheet of music? So the Army is working that very, very hard, so that gets after the knowledge aspect. Another piece that our CIO G6, Lieutenant General Susan Lawrence, is really working is, doesn't it make sense to have that capability at home station? Where as you build your mission command, as you build the network, that same network that you use in the field, that you have it in your headquarters. And so that effort is also underway. But we got a long way to go. Did I answer your question?
You both provided some important points to that, but the problem in general ends up being, and in my experience working through the Army Asymmetric Warfare Office and with JIDO and now back in the medical community, is, and it's not just medical, of course, you have these capabilities, and folks that when you're talking about a material good, they'll look at General Phillips area and they're going to say, and my area as well, they're going to say, okay, I can get this to milestone B, C, et cetera, and get it out in the hands of the warfighter. But at the end of the day, how do I get this training? How do I get this knowledge product? And the challenge I've seen personally is they're so diffuse. You know, with a material item, you've got a widget. We can follow the widget from idea all the way to the point that it's delivered. With a knowledge product, what do I have? I might have a book, I might have a process, I might have all sorts of things, but I know I've got money, so how do I make the most of that money to get something for the warfighter in point? And I believe personally that there are processes already that we could use to do that. We just have to open our mind a bit, and I believe that JSIDS helps with that, or could, if we opened our solutions. I believe that the acquisition system could be utilized for that. We don't have to create new things to do this, but we just have to enable that, and that, of course, in my opinion, would come from your level, if I may be so bold to say.
One follow-up then, and ma'am, I'll be real quick, is if it is a program of record, there is a training program, and the PMs have that, and we normally do pretty good at that, because it's developed over time, new equipment fielding, new equipment training. But we're kind of a victim of our own success in when we had to develop rapid acquisition, and we go downtown and we buy this stuff off the shelf. There's not a training program that goes with that. And we continue to iterate that, buying the new and latest stuff, and the training never catches up. Which gets back to why we've got to stop that. Which gets back to why we really do need to have a rapid acquisition life cycle process. We do need to get stuff in the hands of 2nd Brigade, 1st Armored Division, so we can develop those before we send it to Afghanistan. Because there's no shortage of soldiers who've got great stuff. And talking to my kids, I find that, hey, Dad, you wouldn't believe the stuff we've got in the Connex. We didn't know what it was, didn't know how to use it, nobody trained us on it. And we can do better.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we're going to run out of time. So what I'd like to do is kind of summarize some of the key points for you guys all at once. Maybe you guys capture notes better than I have. But let me do an attempt to summarize what you've heard. Okay, we're leveraging NIE. You've heard about that. We're leveraging this wonderful opportunity to provide us insight in terms of operational utility of our equipment before we deploy it downfield. Have an opportunity for our troops to literally train on it and provide feedback back to the designers. It's an incredibly useful loop. Okay. We're focusing on better buying power. This is something we really didn't cover today. In terms of affordability, each of the PEOs are on a monthly basis now are identifying cost savings on their programs. They're also identifying cost avoidance on their programs. That literally is being tracked, submitted back up to me on a monthly basis to be reviewed, not just by me, but also up to OSD. Okay, so affordability is a huge area we're focusing on, as well as efficiency. We're assessing different types of contracts on programs. As it comes up to my level for review, we're now challenging them. Is this the appropriate type of contract? Okay. We are changing a culture. We're focusing on teamwork and collaboration as never before, right? We're absolutely partnering across the table, okay? We're focusing on affordability, efficiency, not just within one organization, but across multiple organizations. We literally are looking across the board to figure out, if we partner, how can we improve efficiency across the big army. in the area of service contracts, which is 60 to 70% of our contracts. We've literally defined, looked across every single command, every single type of portfolio, in 6 different types of portfolio. We've gotten together in the last 6 months and identified $11.4 billion of savings, just doing things better. Okay? We are looking at our capability portfolio reviews with the Vice, conducting it across the board on our portfolios. What we are doing there is, instead of looking at one program at a time through a soda straw, we're looking across a portfolio. Do we have a balanced portfolio? Do we have the right capabilities at the right cost? If it's not at the right cost, perhaps we can't afford it. So affordability, again, is being considered as an independent variable. Okay? That's something we really haven't done very well before, but now we're doing it. Okay? We're focusing on S&T, on solving Army unique problems. Okay? That's what we need to drive, and that's exactly where we're heading. We're focusing on increasing efficiencies on depots and arsenals. Okay? It's great when I go visit them, and they're bragging about what they're doing to improve the efficiency, cutting out the waste, how many millions that they have saved. That's a cultural change. Okay? We're focusing on streamlining logistics. We're building tools to help us track all of our items. Recently, I came back. I was incredibly impressed with the tool that I saw in theater that help us track. It's a web-based tool. We can Google per fob to understand what equipment we have on the fob. We know how many military folks, civilian folks, contractor folks are supporting that particular equipment. We know how many containers we need to retrograde that equipment. So we literally can look at, we have incredible visibility into our equipment now. Okay? We're increasing industry interactions. We're trying to communicate more, be a lot more transparent and open with industry to understand what we can do better. Okay? And we're looking at the systems as a portfolio rather than one system at a time. This is why it's so important for us to focus on systems as integration, as interoperability. Okay? So that kind of gives you a very quick summary of all the stuff we're doing. I mean, we could be here for the rest of the day talking about this, so we'd love to do that sometime. But I know you've got other interesting things to hear as well. So I thank you very much, and I thank General Wagner for giving us this opportunity to share the insight with you. Okay.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, too. One of the things that several of you mentioned was the net and the importance it is right down to the squad on the battlefield. There is going to be a meeting this afternoon starting at 2:30 on Land WarNet in 152 A and B, which I think would be interesting to some of you if you want to hear the challenges there, because trying to keep up with industry in that area is a nightmare right now if you have to go through the acquisition system. And I know you're working on that, and I'm looking forward to hearing that this afternoon. Okay. You mentioned to me, Ms. Shyu, that you would talk to some of the press if they had any questions afterwards.
Thank you very much for reminding. There's a press conference. Unfortunately, it's not right after this. It's a little bit later.
I'm not familiar with
time. Can you speak up, please? I can't hear you. 3:15? 3:50. 3:15? 3:15. Okay. 3:15 p.m. Do you have the room number, please? 140B. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I wasn't sure about that, so I wanted to make sure when that was. Thank you.
If you have more questions, you can come and listen. Okay. Otherwise, nab one of these fine gentlemen. Thank you.